When you think of America's most infamous killers, Jeffrey Dahmer's name always comes up. His crimes were so shocking, so grotesque, and even decades later they continue to haunt the public imagination. But who was Jeffrey Dahmer? And how did a boy from a seemingly normal Midwestern family become one of the most notorious silly serial killers of the 20th century? Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His childhood wasn't marked by the kind of horrific abuse that some killers experience. In fact, his family was relatively stable, though far from perfect. His father was a chemist, his mother struggled with depression, and the household was often tense. From a young age, Dahmer displayed troubling behavior. He was fascinated with dead animals. While other kids collected baseball cards, Jeffrey collected bones. He would dissect roadkill and preserve bones in jars, fascinated by their texture and sound. Adults brushed this off as a boyish curiosity. But, in hindsight, it was one of the first red flags. By high school, Dahmer was an outcast. He drank heavily, sometimes even sneaking alcohol into class. He would later admit that alcohol dulled his urges and fantasies, which were already turning dark. Shortly after graduating high school, Dahmer committed his first murder. His parents were separated at the time, and Jeffrey was left alone in the family home. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, lured him home with the promise of drinks, and after several hours together, killed him with a dumbbell when Hicks tried to leave. Dahmer dismembered the body and scattered the remains in the woods behind his house. He was just 18 years old. After that first murder, Dahmer seemed to go quiet for nearly 9 years. During this time, he joined the army, but his drinking problem got him discharged. He drifted between jobs and briefly lived with his grandmother, who was one of the only people he had a close relationship with. But his fantasies didn't stop. They grew. Dahmer's murders restarted in 1987 when he lured a man named Stephen Tuomi to a hotel room. After drinking heavily, Dahmer woke up to find Tuomi dead beside him, beaten to death. Dahmer later claimed he didn't even remember doing it, but the act unlocked something in him. Over the next 4 years, Dahmer killed 16 more young men and boys, many of them from marginalized communities, often gay men and men of color in Milwaukee. His pattern was chilling. He met victims at bars, malls, or on the street. He'd offer money to pose for photographs or invited them back for drinks. He drugged them, he strangled them, and then came the dismemberment, necrophilia, and sometimes cannibalism. Dahmer's one-bedroom apartment on 924 North 25th Street became a house of horrors. Inside, police would later find skulls, bones, preserved organs, and Polaroid photos of dismembered bodies. He experimented with preserving bodies by boiling flesh off bones, storing torsos in his freezer, and even attempting crude lobotomies by injecting acid into his victims' skulls, hoping to create a zombie who would never leave him. Dahmer later admitted that his crimes weren't just about killing. They were about control. He didn't want his victims to leave, and death was his twisted way of ensuring permanence. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer's crimes finally came to an end. That night, he lured 32-year-old Tracy Edwards back to his apartment. But Edwards managed to escape after a terrifying struggle, running down the street in handcuffs. Police followed Edwards back to Dahmer's apartment, where they discovered the photographs of dismembered bodies. Within minutes, Dahmer's secret life was exposed. Dahmer confessed in chilling detail, often without remorse, explaining how he killed and why. He was charged with 17 murders and convicted of 15, and sentenced to 15 life terms in prison, over 900 years behind bars. At his trial, the courtroom heard the full horror of what he had done, and families of the victims demanded justice. Dahmer admitted guilt, but he claimed he couldn't control his urges. On November 28, 1994, just 3 years into his sentence, Jeffrey Dahmer was killed by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, who bludgeoned him with a metal bar in a prison bathroom. Some saw it as the final act of justice. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes left a scar on America. The sheer brutality of his acts, combined with his seemingly ordinary appearance, made him a monster hiding in plain sight. His story has been told in countless books, documentaries, and dramatizations. But the real horror lies in how long he was able to get away with it, and how many chances were missed to stop him. And that's the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, the man who became known as the Milwaukee Cannibal. So, he's pretty horrible. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.